Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A71 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I will definitely tell you about the Samsung Galaxy A71 is that within this particular device, I think this is a very interesting phone when it first came out. It may not be like the most perfect phone of all time, but this was, I would say, one of the big upgrades for the A series in general, especially with the A7 lineup. This was a very, very good, decision that's, Samsung made. I still think it's a good phone. Is it worth buying? We'll talk about that throughout this entire video. But if you want to pick up some phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy A71, this particular phone was announced in 2019, but it got released in 2020. So it's about like a little bit over 4 years old as of this point. And I would say the biggest thing going on for the Samsung Galaxy A71 was its big, massive display. It was a 6.7-inch Super AMOLED Plus display, and that is a very, very big size panel to have inside of a phone like this. It was, standard 1080p, so there wasn't anything like super crazy going on with it. And I definitely do think it was like a very good looking panel for the most part. I think like if I'm going through and if I'm picking up a sort of device, this thing I think did a pretty good job at basically everything I threw at it. And from a display perspective back in 2020. However, I do think that this phone has aged quite a bit. Like the panel just doesn't get as bright. There's lots of issues when it comes down to that kind of stuff. But also the other big thing is that with this type of phone, I mean, you're getting like, it's a whole punch display, which is beautiful, but there's no like 120 hertz or 90 hertz on this. It's just standard 60 hertz. And I do think that in and of itself can be kind of a disadvantage for some people, especially in 2000 and, nowadays, when even the cheapest Samsung Galaxy A15 is giving you a 90 hertz panel. So for this thing not giving you that, I think is not the biggest deal in the world, but it can be kind of an annoyance for some people out there. So that in and of itself is just one of those things to keep in mind. Like I said, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but like I said, it can be kind of an annoying thing for some people if they're going through and buying a device like that. So this in and of itself, just one of those, minor things to kind of keep in mind right there. On top of that, I would still say the build quality is good enough. Like it's pretty much just built out of plastic. So it's not going to be giving you like a really great feeling phone. It's plastic back and plastic frame. You are getting though USB-C, which is awesome, but you're also getting a microSD card slot inside of this phone, which is very nice. I love having a microSD card slot, and you're going to be getting that inside of this particular phone, which I think that in and of itself is another very cool thing. So if I'm going through once again, and if I'm picking up one of these types of devices, this is by far one of my most favorite things going on for this particular phone, is that you can just go through and just expand the storage just easily that way. And like I said, it's a very, very cool and nice thing going on for this particular phone when it kind of comes down to it. So that in and of itself definitely gets a thumbs up from me, without a doubt. On top of that, with this particular phone, like I said before, plastic back, so there's not really anything crazy going on there. It's standard wired charging, so there's no wireless charging on this particular phone, which, like I said before, that can be kind of an annoying thing. And you're kind of getting this quadruple camera setup, like we'll talk about that in a second. But overall on the outside, it's not a terrible phone, but you are missing out on a lot of things that we are getting on our phones nowadays. So we're missing out on like wireless charging, we're missing out on like a crazy great camera, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we're missing out on like ProMotion or like 120 hertz that we have on our phones nowadays. But beyond that, I think it's totally understandable. It's a good phone nonetheless. And that's kind of how this phone kind of holds up in 2024. So from the outside, that kind of covers it up there. However, there's another very big thing going on for this particular phone, and that's actually with the camera quality. So when this phone first came out, you're basically getting that quadruple camera setup on the back. Now, with these types of cameras, the thing to keep in mind is that it basically is kind of like a limited type of experience of a camera, because they're not going to put the best camera inside of their A series of devices. They're going to save it for like their more expensive ones. So inside of this device, you're getting a 4K at 30 lens on the back side, then a 4K at 30 lens on the front side. So I think this in and of itself is another very, very big thing going on for this particular phone. So I do think, once again, like if I'm going through and like getting a sort of device, I do think this is a very, very cool thing going on for this particular phone. And I, for one, I'm a very big fan of it for sure. So this in and of itself is another very big thing. I do think with any sort of phone that I'm going to buy, a phone like the Samsung Galaxy A71, the camera quality at that time was not terrible. And I do think that's a very interesting thing going on for these types of phones. Like if I'm going through and buying a phone, at that time in 2020, it probably wasn't that bad. But in 2024, this is definitely a much different type of camera. So if I'm going through and buying a sort of, device or any sort of camera in this day and age, I definitely want it to be, higher quality and higher capability. And with this type of phone, I mean, it's just not really going to be giving you that type of camera. So I don't want to harp on it too much longer, but if I'm going through and buying any sort of device, I definitely am going to feel like I'm going to to be getting a much more limited type of experience with the Samsung Galaxy A71, especially from a camera perspective, because you're not getting that telephoto lens, you're not getting 4K at 60, and those are some very important, pretty basic things to have inside of a phone like this when it kind of comes down to it. So from that side, once again, that kind of covers it up there. Now from software, this phone basically is kind of stuck in this weird phase again where it's like not really supported with Android anymore. It was supported for quite a bit of time, it was still very good, didn't really have too many issues with it. But once again, if you're going through and if you're getting some sort of device, you definitely want to have as good of a, build quality, as good of a software experience as possible. And with this type of phone, once again, it's not really going to be giving you that. It's just one of those things to kind of keep in mind. And I feel like we're going to be going through this time after time after time inside of these particular devices. Like if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, I definitely think you'd want it to have as great of an experience as possible. And with this One UI is great. I love One UI a lot. But the problem with this type of phone right now is that you're just really kind of stuck again with this phase where it's just, we're not really going to be getting any more software updates. So my perspective there is that why would you want to go ahead and basically get this phone from there when you can go and get another device and get a way better experience? So from that side, even though this phone is significantly cheaper, I'd probably rather just buy a Samsung Galaxy A15 from that perspective, because that, although that's going to be a cheaper phone, it's going to be giving you probably some better experiences and software updates than this phone can basically give you. So that right there is like another very big thing to kind of keep in mind there as well. Now on top of that, with this particular device, you're also going to be getting another very important thing, which is the performance. With these particular phones with their A series, they actually did a decent job with the A71. It was giving you that Qualcomm Snapdragon 730 chipset, which actually wasn't that terrible of that year. So again, it was the watered down chipset. It wasn't their 8 series, but it was still kind of respectable in my opinion. And I do think, like, once again, if I'm going through and buying one of these types of devices, I think that's a very, very cool thing going on with this particular phone. So this in and of itself, another very big asset. And like, I do feel like if I'm going through and getting one of these types of devices, it's really not that terrible. And from a performance side, like, you can definitely do a really good job from the performance perspective. I mean, this phone's going to be giving you the, 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's pretty decent in and of itself. And you're going to be getting a very solid experience when it comes down to everything from that side. So I like this phone a lot from that perspective. And I do think that in and of itself is another very, very cool thing going on for this particular phone. So again, not that great of a performing phone anymore, but at the time it kind of was. And I do think this is a very, very cool thing going on for this particular phone too. So to kind of sum it up, what I'll definitely tell you, I really like the Samsung Galaxy A71. I thought it was a good phone when it first came out for the most part for being like a cheap budget phone. But I just don't think this phone is necessarily worth buying anymore. And I think there are better options for most people to actually go ahead and buy rather than this type of device. So I say that to say overall, when I look at a device like the Samsung Galaxy A71, it was worth it for one time, but it probably isn't worth buying anymore. And that's just kind of how I feel about this particular device. So take it as you will, but it's still good. It's still great. There's not too many things to complain about here. But if I am going to go and recommend a device to people, it's probably not going to be like a 4-year-old, like kind of like basic, budget phone. It's going to be like maybe like a 2 or 3-year-old flagship at this point. So that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.